conference on communicating Europe to Australia. And today we will look at what Europe and the EU mean to Australia and how Europe is being communicated to Australian audiences. One of the key questions here is how and why messages about Europe and the EU are being generated by various Australian, European, and perhaps non-Australian actors to reach Australian audiences, and the kinds of message and images that are being produced as a result. So we have invited a panel of, several panels, actually 2 panels of distinguished practitioners and academics to discuss political, cultural, media, and educational interactions between Europe and Australia, as well as Europe and the EU's visibility in Australia. So welcome to all of you, and I will let Franz Josef Dieter, Associate Professor of German Studies at Monash University, introduce the members of the current panel. Thank you all for coming, and a hearty welcome on behalf of the Monash European and EU Center.
Thank you, Pascaline. Welcome to the first panel this afternoon, which will deal with the aspects of culture, politics, and education. We have 5 panelists, each of whom will talk about for 10 to 15 minutes, followed what is hopefully a lively discussion. Our first panelist to my right is Mr. Miguel Gómez de Aranda, who is the Consul-General of Spain in Melbourne. Miguel Gómez de Aranda has served in various positions at Spanish embassies in Pakistan, Turkey, Ireland, Libya, Russia, and Brazil. In 2008, he was Deputy Director General for Consular Affairs in Madrid, and he has been Consul General of Spain in Melbourne since August 2010. Welcome, Miguel Gómez de Aranda. Our second panelist to my left is Mr. Torsten Schulz of the Goethe-Institut Australia. Torsten Schulz studied English and German at the University of Leipzig in Germany. Since 2007, Torsten has worked for the Goethe-Institut here in Melbourne as the German language advisor for not only Victoria, but also Tasmania, South and Western Australia, which is quite a wide range. So welcome, Torsten Schulz. Our third panelist is, to my right, is Ms. Melissa Conde Tyler, who is the National Executive Director of the Australian Institute of International Affairs. That's a position she has held since 2006. Melissa Conde Tyler is a lawyer and specialist in conflict resolution, and Melissa was selected as one of the nation's 1,000 best and brightest to participate in the Australia 2020 summit convened by the Prime Minister to discuss future challenges facing Australia. Welcome, Melissa. Then our fourth panelist is Mr. Frank Marino, who is the principal of the Victorian School of Languages. Frank Marino is a graduate of Melbourne University with degrees in modern languages and education. In his current position as principal of the Victorian School of Languages, he manages the teaching of over 40 languages. Frank is also the foundation president of the Australian Network of Government Language Schools. Welcome, Frank Marino. And finally, our fifth speaker is Pascaline Winand, to my left, who is the director of the Monash European and EU Center. Pascaline Winand has published widely on the European Union and its external relations. She has taught at the European University Institute in Florence, Italy, the Université Libre de Bruxelles in Belgium, and as visiting professor at universities in Ukraine, Russia, Peru, and the United States of America. Since 2009, Pascaline is the Jean Monnet Chair in European Integration and International Relations here at Monash University. So welcome to our host, Pascaline. think we start in exactly this order. Would you like to start?
Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you, for being here. Thank you for your interest in the European Union. Now, let me thank also Monash University, and in particular the Monash European Union Center, in the person of its director, Professor Pascaline, and of course the chair from the associate professor from Goethe-Institut for inviting me to speak to you about the promotion of European culture in Australia from the perspective of the Consul-General of Spain. When Dr. Eva Polonska asked me to talk about this topic of the promotion of the European culture in Australia, the first issue that I had to deal with was European culture. Is there such a thing as European culture? European Union, and even more so the European continent as such, is formed by a diversity of countries. Each one of them hosting a multiplicity of cultures. Is from all these components, this myriad of components, can we extract something we can call, give the title of European culture? What are these different cultures in Europe have a set of common features that could differentiate it from other cultures in the world? Is there anything in common that distinguishes them from the other cultures? I think that there is no obvious answer to this question, and that depends not only on the very concept of European culture we could have, but from what you are comparing it with. If we compare European culture, whatever you can, the different European cultures, with the cultures from exotic, from remote, distant areas of the world, just for example, Africa or Asia, or it would be relatively easy to identify a few common features that are present in the European cultures and maybe lacking in those distant cultures. And they would maybe even to identify common differences too between our cultures and the cultures in those distant countries. But even if these would be relatively easy, we have to take it with a proverbial pinch of salt, because there will be much to be said about what's European culture today, what about the multiculturalization process we have witnessed in Spain, because not only of the immigration movement and with an unprecedented scale, but also the communication of thoughts about culture and everything that the modern media allows. Even if we can consider that, how can apply this to Australia, our presence here in Australia? You say, for example, we can consider that, well, even China, for an example. We do have in Europe, in almost all European countries, there are vibrant and economically active and culturally active Chinese minorities, Chinese communities in all of our countries. But that culture is almost now part of our culture too. But we can consider that there is such a thing as and even Chinese cultures. There are several Chinese cultures, not all China is a monolithic culture, but we could, for approximation, we could consider, well, there is this Chinese culture, this is European culture. There are enough similarities between our European cultures and enough differences for us to make this differentiation. But can the same be proposed about Australia? It has been said that present European culture is based upon Greek philosophy, Roman law, Christianity, and human rights. Well, this is an oversimplification like any other, could be useful for discussion, could be debated, could be argued, and could be nuanced ad nauseam. Some people could say, what about the Germanic customary law? It's not part of our, it's not the marriage between Germanic law and Roman law that make European law. Probably yes. What about Renaissance? Well, we thought Renaissance would, Greco-Roman heritage would be as relevant as it is today for us. Maybe probably not too. What about language? Most European languages, not all of them, but most of them are of Indo-Aryan, Indo-European origin, Slavic, Latin, and Germanic languages all have their share these common roots. But there are others. But about, I don't know, maybe 10% of Europeans do speak non-Indo-European languages. So even that would be a little difficult. But anyway, whatever it is, simplification could be useful, and we can use it. So coming back to Australia, I can imagine that the task, for example, of my British colleague to try and present European culture in Australia, the British as a European culture different from Australian culture. I would say there is much more in common between both, even acknowledging the importance of non-British or non-European cultures in Australia. Still, would be a little bit, I could imagine that my British colleague could relate to be more familiar with the biggies than with Macarena. So it is easy for us to talk about Europe in Australia. And same could be for me as a Spaniard. I'm talking about, let's see something very, very close to me, like a Latvian film, instead of an Argentinian or a Mexican film. Well, yeah, and we have to, because we are talking about European culture, I might argue on favor of this proposition, but I don't think it is not obvious to anyone. Australia, like most countries nowadays in the world, and probably in a highest degree than many others, is a multicultural society, it's a multicultural country. There are many elements in the Australian culture, and of course the indigenous element is primordial. The Asian element is very important. Now, of course, the European element cannot be, it's of paramount importance, cannot be denied. Well, the language we're speaking is a European language. Just you look at it, yeah. This is got a very important, the city of Melbourne is a very important British, Italian or Greek influence. So, to talk about Europe in a country that is not within the European boundaries, but it is so closely related to Europe, is a little especially difficult. Talking about what this oversimplification had been said to be the roots of European culture, the Greco-Roman heritage and Greek philosophy and so on, and human rights and Christianity, are they not part of Australian culture also? So it would be a little difficult to use them as tools to explain, to differentiate us from Australians, being both part of the same, the very same trend in the world culture, with each one with its own specialism, of course, right, within European countries too. Thus, if I had to present European culture to an Australian audience, I would be puzzled indeed. It would not be difficult, however, to present and even to promote European Union, not just European culture, but European Union as such. European Union that, in spite of all the current economic and even social turbulences, within and without the Eurozone, it's not everything outside the Eurozone is not in a rules garden. But we can present it, even in this time, as a very successful mechanism of regional integration, and as the most efficient barometer of peace that Europe has known in history, and a space of freedom, of democracy, of respect for human rights, and even in the current, crisis, a space of prosperity. It would be difficult to explain the European Union, to explain its institutions, explain its decision-making process. I had the occasion to give a lecture on this at the University of RMIT, and the complex way in which the system of checks and balances in the European Union, the different national and sectorial interests, come together like the invisible hand that Adam Smith mentioned to push the European Union towards a direction that some may argue is not the best possible, and I agree with it, but definitely is far from being the worst possible direction. So we do have to, and we have to promote European Union in Australia. A couple of days ago, I attended a very interesting, very enlightening lecture by Professor Alfredo Martinez of the University of Melbourne. His subject was Spanish language as a brand, but we could translate his very interesting reflections and observations from the Spanish language to the European Union as a brand. In the current stage of advanced capitalism, we know that commercial companies work through brand. It's easier for they sell goods and services. They associate goods and services with certain brands, and at the same time, or before that, they associate a brand with a set of images, a set of feelings, positive, if possible, positive feelings that are associated with this brand in such a way that it becomes automatic for the consumer with the brand goes a positive feeling. So they don't need to study case by case each product, its good and service for either buying the commercial decisions. So the same thing we can do with nations, nations. We see that this future brand company has established, has elaborated a very, very precise and prestigious country brand index. I will see how every nation is trying to promote its brand. And supranational institutions like the European Union say we want to promote our brand, we want to create positive associations with our brand. And culture is one means to do that. We part from a very solid basis because, as we could see, for example, in this study of the country brand index, almost all European countries are branded very highly, very positively. They do very strongly in the fields of culture, fields of creativity, fields of history, heritage, and so on. So we part from a very solid basis. And so we can use culture, promotion of culture, to promote the brand of our country. Not only that, it's interesting, there is another very important aspect too of culture. Culture as an industry itself is a very important industry. I have here some figures from the European Commission. We see that the cultural industries in the European Union amount for 3.3% of our GDP. They employ 6.7 million people, which is 3% of the total employment in the European Union. Not only culture, it sells itself, but it helps to sell other products. We are especially over these fashion and high-end industries whose marketing depends very heavily on the cultural branding of the country where these products, these goods are produced. For this, we have another 3%, so we are talking about 6% of the GDP of the European Union, which, by the way, is the highest in the world in the current situation of economic crisis. So we are talking about a huge economic impact of culture. So we have the soft diplomacy, promoting the general European brand, plus the direct marketing of our cultural and related sectors. How the Consulate of Spain is doing it here in Australia, here in Melbourne, we are not only on our own promoting with the touring exhibitions, bringing here professional, artistic, supporting the expression, the creativity. We do have a limited, especially now in these latest years, but budget for that. We'll not go into detail of all the activities we are carrying out along the year to promote Spanish and European culture here. that I just leave this for your consideration, and of course I am willing to take later on any questions you might. Thank you very much for your attention.
Inspiring talk. And Torsten Schulz, you go next.
Well, thank you everyone for having me. Well, I was asked basically to give you an insight into how the work of the Goethe-Institut promotes the European culture here in Australia. And as I'm a teacher, I'm going to take a more practical approach, I think. Are you all familiar with the Goethe-Institut and its work here? A few nods here and there? Okay. Now, I give you a very short insight. Well, it's basically called the Cultural Organization of Germany. So one might think we are the arm of the German government all over the world, which we are not. And basically we receive something like 1/3 of our budget from the German Foreign Affairs Office. But we're not their direct executive all over the world because they're present as well. They set us targets that won't be political targets, but let's say cultural targets and so on. But implementing them, that's our own job basically, and we're relatively free in that. And we have something like a usually 3 to 4 year period to implement it, and then we have to sort of report back to to the Foreign Affairs. So it's not even directly within the German government that we report. The Goethe-Institut all over the world works basically in 3 fields. The first, of course, most of you might know, is language courses. And you wouldn't really think of, let's say, communicating in Europe there, but if you have a language course, you can really imagine with teachers from Germany and sometimes also from other European countries, they usually promote their culture very effectively. But we also support the learning of the language with cultural programs, especially for course participants. And also scholarships are an important part, so people can go back to Germany and have a look around Europe and Germany as well. The next field is a cultural field, and you probably are well familiar with that in terms of, well, the representation I think is quite effective in terms of the arts, film, dance, literature, music, and so on. We also present fields like architecture, philosophy, photography. It's rarely politics, I can tell you. And the third field is education, where we are basically present with, that's where I basically work. That's the professional development for teachers of German here in Australia, and also organizing promotion events for teachers and students, and we provide scholarships for students and teachers as well. There has been a certain development in the past. The Goethe-Institut has just become 6 years old last year. And of course, it is our main task to promote, as for every African cultural institution, to promote its own picture. So the focus is a German aspect, of course. But there has been a tendency, and also, especially from teachers, but from other people, they not only want us to promote Germany, but they also want to know something about Austria or Switzerland, so the other German-speaking countries. So that was a second step in the promotion that we do from the Goethe-Institut. Recently, Europe has been basically, I think, implemented, but we're taking further steps in terms of the globalization. That is basically that we explore topics and activities and organize activities around the world. And now let me give you some examples for that so that you can really have an insight, and perhaps you can attend one of our events, whatever you find attractive to you. In terms of culture and economy, well, you all probably know that Germany is the economic powerhouse in Europe and has become, well, probably ever more present and more important in Europe. And that is basically reflected in magazines that we promote, that the Goethe-Institut basically promotes. And we usually send them out to various partners. Topics are something like wind power. We have also exhibitions on environmental issues. Some topics like solar energy or sustainable living are covered. So that covers an important part of Europe as well. Arts, I think we are much way further in arts already, because we're basically working with other cultural institutions and partners here in Australia. There's, for example, we work together with the NGV. There was an event called Myth, Magic and History, and you might have heard of it. It was basically paintings explained by poems, readings and music, and it was in 3 languages, so in Spanish, in German and Italian, and the Spanish Consulate, the Goethe-Institut and the Italian Institute here in Melbourne work together in this. There's also a small organization called MEEUC, the European National Institutes of Culture, and we are currently having an exhibition about the Pilgrim's Way to Santiago. And the Goethe-Institut is exhibiting parts of the exhibition of the route in Hungary, in the Czech Republic, also Austria, and Spain. The Alliance Française, for example, presents pictures from France and Spain, and the Italian Cultural Institute, they can see pictures of Italy and Slovenia, so a truly European approach, I think. There are other things like you might have been present at the Light and Winter Festival, and it's an international festival. There was a part of it was an international festival of literature, ideas and translations, and each of the, well, quite a few European countries contributed in that with writers, but it was open to the world basically. Another thing you might find interesting is the Audi Film Festival of German films, and there you can see films from not only Germany but also from German-speaking countries, but that's not the only thing. There are cooperations, and you might know that, especially in film, cooperations between several European countries have been there for quite some years. So what you'll find is that German films explore, let's say, topics like Turkish immigration to Germany, so with Turkey being part of Europe, basically. That's important for us. Currently, we have an exhibition called City Tales, but that's a world approach, basically, because there are bloggers from around the world, especially from European countries, and they upload and you can also find out about it online. They upload text, photos, multimedia, and on a monthly basis, and they basically create a kaleidoscope of impressions, opinions, ideas, and of course fun. In education, I'll give you just 2 small examples. We've got a European Languages Festival where we work together with partners, especially from teachers' languages associations. And the other thing is for teachers, we've just finished with the National Conference for Teachers of German, and there we usually have speakers from Germany, of course, but also from Austria and Switzerland. We've had speakers from Liechtenstein, or even from the Belgian German minority over there. So that gives us gives the teachers quite an impression of what's going on in Europe. And we've got we went a step further in terms of openness. As I said, in the globalized world, you need to be open to the world. This year we had speakers from Russia and from India, which gives the German teachers a very deep impression in terms of what it's like teaching German, not only in Australia, they know that very well, but also in Germany, but also Russia or India. So that's very important for the Goethe-Institut, not only to present a European picture, but go and work together with the world. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Torsten. Informative talk. Miguel?
To wait for a moment.
Right,
Pictures.
yeah.
I'm a great believer in pictures, particularly at this time of the day.
It's true. It's always nice to have them, if it works.
Thank you. So my job today is to talk about the Australian Institute of International Affairs and our role in communicating in Europe. And I wanted to thank Monash and particularly Ava for inviting me to speak. I'm probably a little different than some of the speakers here in that the AIA doesn't communicate just on Europe. We look at a wide range of issues in international affairs. And we also talk very much from general things, not just to people who have a particular interest in culture. So what I'm going to do is tell you a bit about the Institute of International Affairs in general, how they work, the family we're part of, look a little bit at the AIA, and then focus in on what we do in Europe. And I'll finish up with some comments on why I think it's a crowded space to try to communicate about Europe at the moment. So the AIA is part of a worldwide family of institutes of international affairs, including all across Europe. The best known ones are ones like the Council on Foreign Relations in the US and Chatham House. The AIA was originally a branch of Chatham House, so that's very much our lineage. The core idea of all of these institutes was about avoiding the scourge of war by trying to promote international understanding. That if you could try to get people in one culture to understand others, you would be able to have that understanding and that connection. These days, the AIA works with 116 other institutes like us around the world, so most countries have things like us. The institutes have a range of activities, and obviously there's variation among them, but the real commonality is that they do this work on international understanding, and they're not academic, they're not government, they're in this space in between. And that's, I think, a very interesting place to be. Because they're in this in-between place, because they're in this liminal position, I think they're very valuable as a bridge and trying to build understanding. That can be a source of advice to policymakers, it can be a track for unofficial dialogue and negotiation, or it can be about public education and understanding. So looking then at the AIA and the way that we work, we're actually one of the oldest institutes, surprisingly, established in 1924, which is actually before the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, but we don't mention that too much. We're very much a community organisation, a civil society organisation. So we're mainly volunteers, only a few paid staff. Despite that, or because of that, we're a very active organisation. So we have around 200 events a year across the country. We've got 7 state and territory branches, so on any given week you'll get a fantastic program of events. We have a range of publications, things like the Australian Journal of International Affairs and the top 50 journals of international affairs worldwide. We have a focus on youth, and that's all the way through that demographic. That's schools programs, careers fairs, internships, youth publications, young professionals networks, a whole range. And we also collaborate with the other institutes around the world on second track unofficial dialogues. In doing all of this, the AIA is self-consciously neutral. Our constitution actually says we may never express an opinion on any issue in international affairs, which some people see as a problem. I see it as a real resource. We're known for our neutrality and being a platform for debate. So strictly speaking, I'd say we're not a think tank, although I was perfectly happy to be in the top 10 think tanks in Asia in the Global Index. However, we would say we're not a think tank because we never have an opinion. Our job is to be this platform, to be this knowledge broker of news. And of course, using new media these days, that means that we have to try to reach out through a range of partnerships. So that's everything from having a YouTube channel to working in partnership with the Australian Public Affairs channel that have our events broadcast on pay TV, and partnering with, for example, the UN Youth Association and the University of Melbourne on new youth websites. So that's in a nutshell. My focus has been thinking about what does the AAAA do with Europe, and clearly is one of the areas we raise awareness on. The AAAA's mission is to look at the range of issues that affect Australia, anything external to Australia that affects us, and clearly Europe is one of those things in that category. So the first area of work is on the events side, and we have a strong series of events on Europe. I just looked up what are the events we've had this year, and I think you can see an interesting group. Some of them, okay, they're about the crisis. Sorry, that's where the debate has been this year. So they're the reactive ones. You know, this is in the news, this is what people are talking about, they want to know. So we've had a range of speakers on that. But then we've had some longer term topics that probably don't come out that much. Like, I'm not sure Poland makes it into that much discussion. I'm sure it should. But, you know, we've had some ones where it wasn't a particularly topical issue. We just thought it was interesting and important, and we wanted to raise people's consciousness about that. You'll see there are a number of the different EU diplomatic representatives to Australia come and speak at our events, and we very much appreciate that. I think it's a great resource to educate the Australian community. We had an interesting example of that not too long ago when Julie Bishop, the Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs, was speaking at our branch on the last sitting day of the year. There was a big vote, I think, on refugee issues. She was delayed. What were we going to do? Well, we put on an impromptu panel of the 4 different EU ambassadors who just happened to be in the audience, and they gave a little taster for the audience on some of the issues around Eurozone crisis. So it was wonderful to have that, and we have that resource available. The second area we're working is on the publication side. And again, looking at the last year, I can see a few that we've had that have really focused in on Europe. Now, some, again, focus on the crisis, yes. The policy commentary brought out in April was very much around that. That said, I think the 4 commentators were very thoughtful and insightful about the longer history and really looking forward. So they weren't just trying to give you a sense right now, they were trying to give you a sense of this as part of a larger project of continuing European integration. As well as that, though, we can be very forward-focused. So the special issue of the Australian Journal of International Affairs, I think, was a really interesting experiment. It was put together as a, I think, I can't remember how many people total, but half of the writers were European and half were Australian, half were practitioners and half were academics. And it was trying to be a very forward-looking look at the trade with Europe. What are the obstacles to trade? What are some of the things that we can be doing about those obstacles to try to increase trade with Europe more broadly? So very policy-oriented, very cool. And these are both on the website. If people are interested in looking more, they can. Thirdly, we have been focusing on some of that second-track dialogue, working with other institutes of international affairs around the world. And 2 in particular, where we have common membership with European nations, ASEM and G20. Now, ASEM, if people aren't aware, the Asia-Europe meeting, Australia only very recently joined. We joined in 2010 in the Brussels meeting after having been basically blocked by the Malaysians for many decades before that. So it's an interesting opportunity. It's a meeting where the EU leaders and Asian leaders, now up to 51 after the Winand summit, come together, talk about a range of political, economic and cultural issues. And when Australia first joined, we thought that the number of people who knew anything about ASEM could, probably be counted on the fingers of 2 hands. So we really thought it was important to try to do some public education on that. So we had some visitors from Asia and Europe coming out and had events in Melbourne and Canberra. We'll continue to be doing things around that. The other one I think is very interesting is G20, because it brings a range of the very powerful G8 members together with emerging middle powers like Australia. And it's a new grouping in that most of us haven't previously had that many opportunities for collaboration. So we worked with the Conde Tyler Stiftung on a couple of events looking at G20 and found that very interesting, and that's something we want to continue doing. We've also been part of the G20 Think Tank Summit, which was organised by the University of Pennsylvania. So trying to keep up those links with the other think tanks, or not think tanks, in that area. The last area in our youth engagement, we also have some European focus on that. It's a mix, obviously, but it goes through a range of different activities. So at the schools level, for example, we organise revision classes for BCE students of international politics, or very named, and some of them have been focusing on European issues. We have an international careers conference, which includes European careers as one of the things people might look at. We have specific youth publications, and people who are studying thinking about Europe have a chance to get their first publication in that area. And in the case of one lucky young person, we actually fund them to go off to Europe. We have a partnership with the International Law Association Australia branch to send a young person off to the Hague Conference on private international law. So if anyone is a law student or graduate or knows someone, do keep that in mind. So overall, among the events, publications, the secretariat dialogue and youth engagement, I think you can see a very active program for the AAA in Europe. But to finish up, I suppose I wanted to give a sense of the crowded space there is in the public discourse in which Europe is trying to gain attention as opposed to other areas. And so I haven't mentioned at all, for example, the work that the AAA has done on the white paper on Australian the 18th century. We've got one of the partners involved in that and have done a lot of consultations. So there's a lot of other things happening. And I thought an easy way to illustrate this was to give you a word cloud. So this shows you the frequency of use of words in a particular document. And what I chose was a speech by the Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, outgoing Secretary of Defence Richardson, in one of, I think, only 4 speeches he gave last year. And he was talking about Australian foreign policy in a changing world. So my question, can anyone find Europe there? Can you take it? Is there? It's under the second O in economic. We found it. Okay. So, now, I wasn't surprised that Europe came in smaller than China or Indonesia. I am surprised it's smaller than Africa. And I think, while, as the Consul said, Australia may have European roots, there's a real danger that Australian focus right now is elsewhere. And there's a danger that many Australians, when they think about what are the new and interesting opportunities of where they should be, thinking of business or study or travel, etc., that they don't think of Europe. They think of other parts. The AAA has a view that Europe deserves continuing focus on all grounds, on the economic grounds, on political grounds, on cultural grounds. And so the AAA will continue to have a strong focus on Europe in the AAA's programs, even in a very crowded space. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We would like Conde Tyler for helping us to find Europe. Frank Marino, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be providing a brief snapshot of the teaching of Europe on the teaching of the European languages in Victorian primary and secondary schools. When the University of Sydney was founded in 1850, its motto translates as though the constellations change, the mind is still the same. When you translate that, it means something along the lines of the same spirit under a different sky, or a British institution, British and European institution on the other side of the world. And this was obviously reflected in the choice of languages taught at the university, French and German and the classics. And the same languages were taught in Victorian schools until the end of the Second World War, and the French and German. And the Catholic schools had Latin, and some of the other independent schools had classical Greek, or ancient Greek. Now, a group of teachers in 1934 approached the Education Department. They had been to Japan and they said, wouldn't it be good to introduce Japanese? So they went to the Education Department, and the Education Department said, no, there aren't enough students in any one high school. And then somebody came up with the idea of, well, you teach Japanese at one school and you invite students from all the neighbouring schools. So that's when the Victorian School of Languages commenced. It's an arm of the Education Department, a statewide service. And it commenced in 1935 by teaching Japanese. And within a couple of months, the Dante Alighieri Society approached the department, and Italian was introduced. So a total of 150 students, started small. Classes commenced at McRobertson Girls High School and stayed there until 1942 when the American Army moved in. And the classes, interestingly enough, continued right during the Second World War, which is quite surprising. And so the school is in its 77th year of operation, and Caroline teaches something like 44 languages in about 43 campuses around Victoria, and it also has a distance education section teaching 11 languages at the secondary level. And so the languages are a balance of European and Asian. And this is a model that is homegrown. It's a Victorian model. There are other models in other states, but in Victoria we have Victorian School of Languages got a distance education, it has centre classes, and then it works with the languages section of the department. And this produces a centralised model, and it also, you have information between, of curriculum expertise between the three areas. Distance education courses are tested with face-to-face students, and strict enrolment guidelines. The school is able to draw on a large teaching staff, and you avoid duplication of services, and most important, cost efficient. Very important these days for an organisation to be cost efficient. So these are the languages that were introduced. So Japanese, Italian, Dutch in the 1940s, White Dutch, Dutch East Indies or Indonesia. So that's, and then interestingly enough, about 1948, China, 1945, Russian, Chinese about 1948. And in the 1970s, one of the principals, Stefan Kasarek, he was from, he was a Slovak, from the Slovak part of Czechoslovakia, so he introduced lots of Eastern European languages, Estonian, Ukrainian, Latvian, Lithuanian, etc., etc. In the 1980s, we saw Serbo-Croatian split up into two components, Croatian and Serbian. And then 1990s, obviously more of the Asian languages, Filipino, Sinhala from Sri Lanka, Tamil, Amharic from Ethiopia. And recent languages are the refugee languages. So whenever there's a group of, when the federal government allows refugees to come in, the school gets contacted and asked to provide the languages. So Dari from Persia, Tigrinya, Gujarati, Punjabi, once again Indian Dinka, Africa, Somali, Korean, and Chinhaka from Burmese, lots of Burmese settlers. So the number of these classes increased dramatically post the Second World War, especially in the 60s and the 70s. And accreditation at the Year 12 level is considered essential. Year 12, we call it VCE, used to be called HSC, used to be called matriculation before that. Very, very important because it provides status, to the students, and the language can contribute to tertiary entrance, and VCE results. So, as I said before, these number of government language schools were set up in other states. New South Wales is the second oldest, South Australia, Northern Territory. A couple of states still don't have them. And also, the main languages have also been taught through distance education schools. Now, Australia is a very large country, and therefore distance education or correspondence schools is very, very important. Even Victoria, when you look at the map of Victoria, it looks like a little state. Well, no, it's actually very large, same size as United Kingdom, a bit smaller than France, and so you have lots of isolated rural schools that can't offer the full curriculum, and therefore they rely on the correspondence or distance education school to fill in with the physics teacher, maths teacher, or the language teacher. And so, so originally the languages were, French, German, etc. And more recently, some time ago now, Japanese was added, Indonesian was added, and Chinese about 5 years ago. Okay, we obviously operate under various state and federal policies. There are lots of them. I've just highlighted a couple of them. Languages for Victoria's Future from a state policy from 2003 that recommended 8 priority languages, and it was a balance between 4 European and 4 Asian languages. The European were French, German, Italian, Greek, the Asian, Japanese, Indonesian, Chinese and Vietnamese. Then to skip a number of years, we had the NALSAP languages announced by the federal government in 2008, and obviously these recommended 4 languages: Chinese, Korean, Indonesian and Japanese. And you had to change the government, etc., etc. You're all familiar with the national curriculum, and that has commenced with 3 subjects, and languages. The first stage of the languages has commenced. Chinese and Italian will be implemented first. Why though? So once again, 1 European, 1 Asian. Why Chinese? Well, it's the biggest language in Australia and the most complex. It's a character-based language, and at the VCE level there are 3 different types of examinations. You have Chinese first language, you have Chinese second language for people from a non-Chinese background, and the other one is Chinese second language advanced. That's for people that come from students who come from a Chinese background. And Italian is the biggest European language taught in Australia. Now, the ACARA, the national curriculum, has also highlighted a number of other languages, and they're all there. And the 2 latest editions were Hindi and Turkish. But the implementation timelines are vague. Currently, the Education Department and the State Government are working on a policy called or strategy called Languages 2025. It's about to be released. The latest is probably next month, and it should be circulated in the new year. And a couple of weeks ago, we had the federal white paper, Australia in the Asian Century, which, interestingly enough, changed one of the four languages. So Korean has been dropped, and Hindi and replaced with Hindi. Now, in Australia, or in Victoria, 22 languages, European languages, are offered at the VCE level, year 12. And these are the figures. So you can see that some of the figures are quite small: Albanian, Armenian, Dutch, Hungarian, Maltese, Portuguese, Ukrainian. Now you compare this with the next slide. There's 11 Asian languages at the VCE level. I left Bengali on because that lost its enrolments a couple of years ago and lost its VCE accreditation. But as you can see, the Chinese is by far the largest. Hindi is still very small. Even students from an Indian background are reluctant to study Hindi because they say we must concentrate on English. And there's a different system in India for university entrance. If you want to study medicine in India, you concentrate on your biology, chemistry, physics. History, geography, all the other art subjects do not count. And so it'll take some time. So they're the figures for that. And I've also lumped some other languages together just superficially. But quite clearly, you can see the total percentage of students studying European languages is about 39%, 39.2, compared with 55.4 Asian, And then if you add, Persian, to Asian languages, the numbers are even higher. Although these figures, the Asian languages have got to be tempered by the fact that there are lots of Chinese students in Australia, and they tend to study Chinese at the BCE level. Now, just a couple of figures. I didn't have time to add the 2000